Hey, everybody. There are a ton of questions to get through. People posted questions on Instagram, so I'll be reading from a bunch of those. Also, if you want to post questions, though, in the sidebar, in the chat box, go ahead. If there's a lot of chat going on and I miss some question, don't be afraid to post it again. I will try to get to as many questions as we possibly can over the next hour, but it's entirely possible I won't get to them all. So I'll also be posting some answers on Instagram later. But with that, welcome everybody. Thank you for dropping on by. For some of you, it's lunch hour. Some of you, it's in the evening or the morning. Have a seat, gather around, and let's get started. There's a couple on Instagram that I'll start with first, and then we'll just let things roll. And I know we got some alpacas in the sidebar. So everybody be nice, obviously, if you're chatting with an alpaca, because they're so gentle and soft. The first question here. So here's a question from Instagram. How to not use anxiety and worrying as prerequisites for doing important things. And it really helped me to see, okay, so we often think of ourselves as struggling with anxiety, depression, OCD, intrusive thoughts, whatever. But it helped me to recognize that I wasn't struggling with them. I was relying on them. I would only do things that were good for myself or good for work or good for a relationship after I felt bad. And we get hooked on putting these feelings we say we hate, we get hooked on putting them at the center of our lives, so that we only live when they're present. And like I always describe this is like if you had a dog. So say you have a dog and you only feed your dog after it starts eating the furniture. So you're like, oh, dog's eating the furniture again. I guess it must be hungry. I better go feed it. And that's what we're just constantly doing in our lives with things like stress. Oh, I'm stressed. Okay, I better get this work done. I'm really late. I'm going to feel bad, or I'm letting this person down, or that person is going to be angry at me, or I'm going to hate myself. And we've got to recognize that dog needs to get fed before we feel bad about not feeding it. And we really need to make this switch in our lives to getting proactive, that the things we can do that are beneficial to our lives, whether it's at work, it's in relationships, it's our own self-care, are beneficial to do before we feel we're missing them, right? Before we feel bad about them. And I know, and for me, this was like such a huge shift because I only relied on anxiety and pressure, and and then I would feel terrible, and I might stay up all night and get something done, or I'd feel terrible, and then I'd be really good, and it just puts feeling terrible at the center of our lives, and we don't have to live like that. Okay, so yeah, do things proactively. Right? Do things before you feel you need to. There are a bunch of questions over here in the sidebar. I'm just going to check what's going on over here. Let's see here. When I cut compulsions, it seems like the end of the world, and I cry very much because of this pain. Okay, yeah, and super normal. This is one of the reasons why, in things like, my book, You Are Not a Rock, or even like the Mind Workout, right? Same book. The reason it's called the Mind Workout is because doing these making these changes to take care of our mental health is intense, right? It's physically intense, and it can be just as painful as physical exercise. And it's useful to start to recognize that. It should be intense. When we're cutting out compulsions, especially after years of practicing them, it's going to be very challenging. And so just something to keep in mind, like recognize that it's supposed to be challenging. When you go to the gym, if it's your first time exercising, you're going to feel really sore. You're going to want to collapse and vomit. You're going to be sweating all over the place. You're going to feel terrible. You're going to ache for days. But in physical fitness, we recognize that's part of the process. For some reason in mental health, we're still so terrified of feeling bad, and we hate feelings. And that's just not useful to us. So really just start to honor that, experience. It's natural for it to hurt. And you'll see some people from Finland and Poland. Hey, everybody out there. Somebody asked about depersonalization. I have a video. If you look up, I think it's called Overcoming Depersonalization and Derealization. And it talks about tackling the compulsions that actually fuel depersonalization, it's going to be a lot of checking stuff, right? The more we check, the more our brain looks for things for us to check, and it just very naturally will settle on something that we find impossible to check, and that we really care about, which is probably going to be, am I really me? Does this feel real? Stuff like that. Okay. Before some of these questions slide away, I'm just, hey, Mark, so I have a question about how should I deal with the loss of libido due to my HOCD, and it's definitely been getting me down recently. So I was wondering how I should approach this. Yeah, and you could look at this like really broadly because I'll get a lot of questions about loss of libido or obsessions or anxieties that are interfering with sex and things like that. And again, part of it is going to be to approach it in such a way that it's not about, oh no, I have to do this, and if I don't do this, it means things, and making ourselves really, really anxious and trying to control things. Because then, of course, very naturally, like nobody is going to feel sexy and turned on again under pressure, right? So that, in some ways, going back to what I talked about at the beginning, like we have to stop seeing these things as problems to fix. And so it's really freeing to go into a situation like being intimate, where it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to go in, and this is just about what I give, and I'm not going to be checking and trying to control and trying to judge what's happening in my body, because it's very much that judging that makes us not have it, right? It's just like any compulsion, right? If you're constantly checking the doorknob, all right, no pun intended, a little bit of pun intended. If you're constantly checking the doorknob to feel a particular way because you want to like feel safe, right? What does your brain do? Your brain always makes you not feel safe. So you keep engaging in the compulsion. So if you're engaging in compulsions to feel arousal, to get your libido back, that's very naturally going to make you not have it. So, really letting go of those compulsions. And you're probably going to want to look at compulsions in other areas of your life as well. Okay. I'm going to pop back over to an Instagram question here, because this one, caught my eye because it brought up a mental illness that I have never heard of, but also I couldn't find any evidence of it online. So the question was, is there such a thing as tormented artist disorder? Which of course the short form would be TAD. So I've never heard of tormented artist disorder. When I first heard about that, I thought maybe it was the disorder that makes artists write those really obtuse and confusing word vomit descriptions, but that are always beside their paintings in galleries. But online, I didn't find anything about that online. And so here's the thing that I would bring up here, because maybe this is what's going on. When we're struggling, we often want to go searching for a label to stick on it. And you'll see this with people, no matter what kind of symptoms they're dealing with, they're often trying to find, why am I this way? What's wrong with me? What's the defect? Let's put a label on it. And that, so that's extremely common, but it's like that maybe isn't so helpful. It's understandable, but yeah, not so helpful. Instead, it can really help to shift the focus to where you want to go. Because and we have a mental health care system that will be happy to stick labels on you. But no matter what label you stick on the challenges you're running into, it's not going to change the healthy things you can do, right? The places you can go, right? The actions you want to bring into your life. And there is nothing in you that's preventing that. It's so useful to stop seeing ourselves as these holes that need filling, right? We are not problems to solve. The thing is, if you see yourself as this problem to fix, I've got this defect, I've got this thing that's wrong with me, and I've always got to manage it and control it. Really, what just happens there is it just sticks with you, right? We're constantly at battle with ourselves and trying to fix ourselves, and our brains are more than happy enough to give us things to fix. And so even though the thing we want most is to desperately solve this problem, all we're actually doing is digging the hole deeper and deeper and deeper. So I understand there's utility, I would say, to labels if it's going to help you get help. Right? So maybe you need to get a diagnosis in order to get insurance, to pay for therapy or something like that. But beyond that, I think it's always really important to remember that, like mental illness labels are these kind of constructed things. It's not like you're going into the doctor and they're going to do a blood test and they're going to find like the borderline germ or the OCD bacteria, right? Does not exist. So, use labels as they're useful to you, but watch out for getting stuck on them. Okay, a question over here on YouTube. Let's see here. We've got a couple. Hey, are you going to write the questions and minutes after doing the Q&A as a script? This is the first live Q&A I've done, so if that's possible, I'll do that. Like if YouTube is automatically going to generate that, I'm all for it. If not, I'm not sure. I'll do whatever I can afterwards. Another question here. What about scrupulosity? So scrupulosity, for those of you who aren't familiar with fears around religion, spirituality, being punished by God, and so on. And what's neat about scrupulosity here, but scrupulosity, as far as we know, I mean, you could always argue there's lots of historical evidence of mental illness, but scrupulosity is actually one of the, like, we have a historical record of a person struggling with scrupulosity. I think it was back in like the 1500s. It was basically this guy in church who was afraid that he was shouting out blasphemous statements, but he wasn't. Right? And so and you can see there a very common fear that, we've said something against God that's horrible and terrible, and we're going to be punished for, and then we have to atone for it and engage in compulsions to make up for it. The thing is, though, this is not something you approach any differently from any other set of compulsions. There's a fear there, there's uncertainty, and the problems come from us trying to control that uncertainty. So it's, again, really useful to accept that uncertainty. It's natural that the brain chases after religious and spiritual uncertainties because they're inherently about things that we don't control. And so it's, again, useful to recognize that the brain will always go searching for the things that will get you to engage in compulsions. And so it's going to settle on things like existence, eternity, heaven and hell, stuff like that. It's very, very common. And so just being able to recognize that, right? Why your brain is worrying about that stuff. Let's see here. How do you cut out compulsions when you're worried about violent, intrusive urges? I'm worried letting my guard down will mean I could act on the thoughts. This makes me worry that the thoughts are me. Actually, there was a question on Instagram that I was going to talk about this. So this topic. And so maybe this is a roundabout way to think about it. But so here's the question that was on Instagram. Do you still get OCD doubts or questions in your head once in a while? And so, because I think when people are talking about something like OCD thoughts or doubts, often what they might mean is, violent thoughts, right? So violent, intrusive thoughts. And the thing that I really want to emphasize, no matter what label you've stuck on your mental illness symptoms, if you want to get over it, it can really help to start recognizing that it's about stuff we do to thoughts and urges. It is not the presence of the thoughts and urges that are the problem. So that's why I would say, like, if someone asks, like, do you have OCD thoughts? I would say, well, no, because there is no such thing as an OCD thought. OCD is what you do to the thought. Right? So think right now. So if I had, I've got a big window out here, I can see down the street. Let's say I saw somebody down on the street and a thought pops into my head. Well, what if I actually, accidentally dropped some stuff downstairs earlier when I was coming back from the grocery store, and somebody's that elderly man down there, he's gonna slip on it. He's gonna tumble into the street. That dump truck that's coming down the street is going to swerve to miss him, and it's gonna go and crash into the school bus that's going through the intersection right now, just full of kids and shelter puppies, because they gave all the kids puppies to carry. And so all of the kids and all of the puppies and the old man and the guy in the dump truck, they're all going to get killed, and it's all my fault. And so I could say, oh no, like that's a horrible, violent, intrusive thought, or you could say it's even something simpler, like something I've struggled with all the time, a fear that I would stab somebody. Okay, so I'm going to do something. It's going to cause a whole lot of people to get killed. That is not an OCD thought. Right? That is a thought. Hey, it's something in my head. The problems only arise if I start to do stuff to that thought. So if I think, oh, like I shouldn't have that thought, or oh no, I have to go and check and make sure that that's not going to happen, or what does it mean about me that I'm having this thought? Right? Does that mean, oh, because now I'm going to test how I feel? Like, why am I not anxious? Does the fact that I'm not anxious mean that I actually want to do that? And all of that kind of stuff. Right? So it's entirely about what we do to it. The moment we start judging a thought, the moment we start trying to control it, trying to decipher meaning, again, trying to solve ourselves, the moment we see thoughts as problems and we see ourselves as problems because we're having those thoughts, that's where the disorder comes from. That's the mental illness. And it's just so useful to start to recognize that. And so if you're talking about, how do you cut out compulsions when you're worried about violent, intrusive thoughts? Like really start to look at all of the compulsions that are happening there. Because often we'll think, so say with knives, for example. So I had what you could say were stereotypical knife compulsions, like where I wouldn't touch knives. And if I did touch a knife, I would carry it over the counter because I was convinced like there was a cat. Remember, I had a cat. If I held it out over the floor, the cat would come along and I would stab it or drop it into the cat. And so you could say those are the compulsions to cut out. But the reality is there's all of these other compulsions going on there, particularly inside my head, where I'm having a thought and thinking, oh no, this thought is reality. I have to control things based on this thought. I have to control things to get rid of this feeling that's inside of me. Those are compulsions to cut out too. And the reality is you're going to find those compulsions throughout your life, where we're constantly judging thoughts, believing in thoughts, and engaging in compulsions to control our feelings. So yeah, it's very difficult to cut out compulsions around violent, intrusive thoughts. So look at all of the compulsions that you're engaging with around thoughts, because you may start somewhere else. That's much easier, but is actually the same set of compulsions. Okay. Somebody asked here, yesterday I was watching some of your videos. Thank you. Thank you for watching the videos. I had a very hard month. Every single day I was struggling with PRO. Now I feel I'm getting better. Oh, I appreciate you so much. Oh, it's not even a question. Thank you. I'm glad you found these tools useful. Another question here. Is it normal to always have a feeling of finding myself? I'm scared to get better because I'm scared that finding myself is not being in love with my partner or whatever. I hate the OCD gut feeling. This is kind of what I was talking about there, where we start to we're just constantly judging and trying to control feelings and things like that. And so and see ourselves as a problem to solve. And that'll often come up in who am I really? How do I know what I truly want in life? What is a true feeling and what is a real feeling of being me? And I would just watch out for that stuff. The moment you see your brain, you could really look at all these challenges. It's just being about how we handle uncertainty. And the moment you see your brain chasing after certainty, just know that it's just going to keep coming up with more uncertainty. Right? So if you want to chase an uncertainty or chase certainty because you're uncertain about who you are, then it's very natural that your brain notices that, thinks, oh, she wants to chase certainty. Okay, well, so if she wants to be certain about who she is, then what's something else she'll want to chase certainty around? Well, what about your relationship, right? Because you really care about that. And so just being aware of that. It's really useful for our mental health to start to embrace uncertainty. Okay. I'm going to hop over to Instagram. Here was I loved this question. And so I'll read out the question and then I'll explain a little bit. Okay. How do you behave like you're okay when you're bombarded with clothes in your head? And so I contacted the person who left this question and I asked them if they were actually worried about being bombarded by clothes. But it turned out that was just autocorrect and they meant thoughts. But let's use clothes as the example. So say you were going about your life and somebody started to throw clothes at you. So you're walking down the street and suddenly there are clothes falling on you. And so here's the thing, so if suddenly you're going about your everyday life and suddenly you're being bombarded with clothes, I mean, you really have some choices here, because you could stop. You could stop right there on the street and be like, who threw those clothes at me? You have to stop throwing clothes at me. You're getting in my way. You could start to fight the clothes, right? Because if they're throwing clothes at you, like maybe you're trying to, bat them away. Or, so you could do that. You could put your life on hold to fight the clothes. Or you could catch the clothes and see if it's, something you want to wear. And if it is, carry it with you. And if it's not, just toss it aside and keep on walking. Because odds are too, you probably have something you want to go and do. Do you really want to put your life on hold to deal with some random clothes that got thrown at you while you're going about your everyday life? And this is what happens so often with thoughts. Right? We're going about our everyday life, and a thought gets thrown at us. And it's really useful to see that thoughts are experiences. So that's kind of key to this. Like, really think about thoughts as being the same as those clothes. Right? They're things we experience. We can catch it. We can decide whether we want to do something with it, or we can just keep on walking. It's the moment, like I was talking about earlier, the moment we start to hate the fact that it's happening, the moment we start to judge it, the moment we want to control it and fix it, that's where the problems come from. Okay? Sometimes in life, we are in situations where people are throwing things at us that are much worse than clothes, things that can actually hurt us. But again, the reality is, like, we have to focus on the change there and what we do with that. So if we want to, if we do need to go and find a way to stop the person that's throwing things at us, then that may be something we need to do in order so we can go about our lives. But thoughts coming from inside of us, not those. Okay. Let's see here. Is it normal? Oh no, we got that one. I had a mental health lecture for 80 people today. People fell in love with your mental health is the practice of being yourself. Some professionals especially. Yeah, there are t-shirts now. I don't know if they're appearing by the live stream, but we started making kind of everybody has a brain t-shirts with different quotes and stuff like that on them. They're on Teespring. If you have anything you want to see on a t-shirt, let me know and I can throw it up there. How often do you plan on doing these Q&As? Yeah, maybe weekly, maybe every other week. I find it incredible to see how far you've come from mental illness now, having so much experience with creating and maintaining good mental health. And I think this really is something that anybody can do. The original reason for starting to do this stuff was just recognizing that the science on mental health recovery was awesome. It wasn't making it to people and wasn't making it to mental health services. Like, there's this big gap between where the science is at and where mental health services are at, and it's a significant gap. And what we can really create now is a way of building mental health community that's just like physical fitness, right? Where you just have lots of people learning about these skills and engaging with them in their everyday lives. Right, in the same way, like, you probably don't go to your doctor to exercise, right? That's something you do outside of the healthcare system, even though exercise is one of the most beneficial things we can do for our health. And we really need to grow a community that's very similar when it comes to mental health. Yeah, like when there's an injury, when there's a real problem, go to healthcare services. But we need to create a community around proactively, just doing healthy things, doing exercises, so cutting out compulsions, learning how to bring things into our lives that we really care about. And that's so important. And so that's, the reason for doing this stuff like this, and then creating supports for other people to do the same, right? So that we really have a whole lot of people sharing the different techniques they're doing to take care of themselves. Let's see here. Whoa. Thank you, everybody, for all of these questions popping up here. Okay, keep the questions going. I'm going to pop back over to Instagram, because I know there were a bunch over here that people posted yesterday. Here's a quick one. 3 cups of black coffee a day. Is that unhelpful when having an anxiety disorder? It depends. Like, if the coffee shop owner has an anxiety disorder, their anxiety disorder will be relieved by you coming to buy 3 cups of coffee every day. For you, and so I have 2 videos on caffeine and anxiety. I would suggest checking those out. It's really important, and you'll hear about this a lot. People saying, "Oh, like to fight anxiety, cut out this food or stop drinking that or doing whatever." I'm very wary of things like that because I see them as just engaging in more compulsions. Like, here's a feeling, and we have to like fix it and control it. The reality is, you know what? Like I drink caffeine all the time. There's caffeine in this mug right here. But when I was really struggling, I would also, caffeine could make me descend into compulsions. Like if I was going to go to the gym and I had one of those pre-workout drinks that has lots of caffeine in it, I wouldn't make it to the gym. I would just descend into compulsions. I would just start doing compulsions, and then it'd be like 2-3 hours later, and it'd be too late to go to the gym. So yeah, absolutely. But again, this isn't about the feelings. This is about what we do to them, right? So if that feeling of like, oh no, my heart's racing and I need to do stuff comes up, I have a choice, right? I can notice that and be like, okay, of course that's happening. And now I'm going to go and do something I want to do. Or that pops up and I can start reacting to it and attaching meaning to it and wondering what's going on. And am I having a panic attack and what's happening here? And I better check that and control that. And then of course that's very unhealthy for me. So yeah, drink whatever you want. Recognize that it's about what you do to those feelings. And you can change that, right? Instagram. Oh yeah, and if anybody out there in YouTube land doesn't know where my Instagram's at, it's at Mark W. Freeman. So just Instagram.com, Mark W. Freeman. And I will answer another question over here on Instagram. Let's see here. Is it possible to fully recover from sensory motor symptoms? So yes. This is another great way to see, and actually it's great to talk about this right after coffee. Because one of the issues with something like caffeine is that it feels very physical, right? And we actually might have like our heart racing, but there's actually things happening in our bodies there that our body is then reacting to, thinking, oh no, something's going wrong. Same with sensory motor symptoms. And so for anybody who's not familiar, sensory motor, these are like physical symptoms where we might feel like it could be anything. It could be ringing in the ears, seeing things in our eyes, focusing on blinking, focusing on breathing or swallowing, right? Things like that, things that are related to our bodies. You could even very broadly, a lot of people will experience like different pains and stuff like that they want to control. We really always come back to it though, that it's about, again, trying to control uncomfortable feelings. And your brain, like I was talking about with a couple examples at the beginning, your brain is going to go searching for the thing that you're going to react to with compulsions. And so you'll often see, and I've often seen this when working with people. So we work on cutting out a bunch of compulsions around something going on in their head, or it's around anxiety. And the brain sees like, oh, okay, this person no longer reacts to anxiety. How am I going to get them to do compulsions? Oh, I know, I'll give them something physical, right? Because they'll react to a physical discomfort. And so this is one of the reasons I often tell people to approach things like anxiety and depression as emotional pain, right? So really we're going from one type of pain, and then we realize, okay, I'm not going to engage in compulsions to fix that pain anymore. I'm going to accept it. I'm going to accept that pain, let the anxiety be there, do things I value. Okay, great. Then your brain goes, okay, well, I'm going to give you a new type of discomfort. And then often we will react to it because we're judging the physical sensations as different or more important and real. Like we get caught up in this idea of it being real. So it's useful to recognize emotions are real too, right? All of that anxiety you experienced, it was real. The pain you're experiencing or the discomfort, it's real too. Whether something's real or not is irrelevant. It's all about how are you going to handle it. And so it's entirely possible to get over sensory motor symptoms, just like it's entirely possible to recover from any other symptom. We got a lot of smiley faces. Oh, here's an interesting question. What do you think of feminism? What ways can it relate to mental health? So this is actually, back there where I was talking about the clothes, like if somebody's throwing clothes at you, all right, so not a big deal. But if you're in a situation, and always remember this was great. I was doing a talk once on mental health, and there were a bunch of different panelists, and it was loosely related to food. And so one of the panelists was a naturopath, and the naturopath got up and was talking about how like mental illnesses are caused by vitamin deficiencies, and he was saying, oh, like, oh, you don't have this vitamin, you don't have that vitamin, and there's these things wrong with you. And this, I wouldn't see that as any different than the typical like, oh, you have some chemical imbalance, right? Where we see the person has this imbalance and there's this thing wrong with you. And then a young woman got up and she told this story of how she had been harassed. She was being harassed by a bunch of guys in her school group, and this school group that had once been, and it was related to food. It was like a gardening group at their school that had been the support for her taking care of her mental health, became this place that was full of anxiety, right? Because there you have the example, it's not clothes being thrown at you, it's not simple thoughts, it's more like rocks. So you're going to this place and people are being violent towards you. And she went to the professor, also a guy, he just did the like, oh, it's just guys being guys kind of thing. And nothing was done. Right? And so this is where you see why something like feminism is so important. And we could really look at anything, why equality is so important for mental health. Because if you're going in to a situation, you're trying to be yourself, but other people are doing things to you that are preventing that, right? If other people are, threatening you, it's very natural that you're going to struggle with your mental health. It's very natural to be anxious there, right? It's very natural to experience pain, right? Just because somebody's throwing something at you. And this is why I always find it ridiculous. And so often, and you'll see this a lot in the mental health care system, and we still do this, where we pathologize women's natural reactions to the violence perpetrated against them by men. And that's just, really important to think, like, and that's what I'm thinking, particularly with that naturopath there. Like, if this woman had come into him and said, oh, I'm struggling with a lot of anxiety, he would have said, well, you've got a vitamin deficiency, right? But the imbalance was not inside of her, right? The imbalance was around her. And so, yeah, no matter who it is, it's so important. Like, if we care about mental health, and as a community, we say we care about mental health, it's really important that we're actively creating spaces that are welcoming for all people, right? And so it's still a huge problem, I would say, in the mental health care system. And this goes back to, in many ways, how mental health care services began, and even like diagnoses, like hysteria came into existence, right? They were really about, oppressing and pathologizing emotions, and particularly, oppressing women and controlling women. And so, really something to think about when we're looking at mental health services, mental health diagnoses, and so on. Okay. Let's see here. Thinking one enjoys. Let's see. So the question is: thinking one enjoys their intrusive thoughts, but the idea of enjoying it causes distress and fear. How to work around this? Again, and your brain will just always latch on to whatever will get you to react and get upset. So if that's about, oh no, what if I like that? Again, it's so useful to just recognize whatever stuff is in our heads, we've got to shift the focus to actions. Right? So doing healthy things for ourselves and for those around us. Let's hop over to Instagram here. How do you maintain your motivation following a relapse? So I don't think I have the bookmark saved. I don't know if you've got You Are Not a Rock. There is, of course, a hilarious picture in You Are Not a Rock. I'm not going to find it right now, but in You Are Not a Rock, there is a drawing of what I think about motivation. Not useful. Motivation is a unicorn fart. So when you find yourself in a relapse, often the problem is that we relapse and then we engage in more compulsions, right? Judging ourselves, hating ourselves, trying to control ourselves. It's useful to always look at this moment, right? We're not, recovery, so often we approach it like we're creating this big, beautiful crystal vessel, and we're going to fill it up with recovery. And the longer we go, the bigger it gets, and we get so terrified of breaking it. And of course, it smashes, and it gets glass everywhere, and the contents get all over everything. I would approach each moment as an opportunity to look at the context in which we find ourselves and then make a choice that's aligned with what we care about. Right? So in any moment, we're asking ourselves, how can I do, how can I spend my time and energy in a way that matters to me? That's healthy for myself and those around me. And that's all we have to do in each moment. And so I would even, step away from seeing, recovery as this big thing and relapse as this big problem. If we did some compulsions, that's fine. We can do compulsion. But what do I want to do in this next moment? So really empower yourself, take back control there. How would you tackle OCD and when recovery itself becomes an obsession? This is a great question. This is something to watch out for because you'll probably find one of the last fears you need to get comfortable with is the fear of relapse. Because as long as you're afraid of and trying to control relapse and prevent slipping back into whatever mental illness, you're already in it. Because it's all about experiencing fears and uncertainties and reacting to them and trying to control them. I always encourage people to step away from the battlefield and have a plan for it. At some point, you got to walk away from the battlefield because if you only measure success by defeating enemies, you will always need enemies to fight. And you'll be like, oh, why are there always so many enemies? Again, it's like we were talking about at the very beginning. Right? If we put anxiety and stress at the center, if we put mental illness at the center, right, this is the thing that motivates me, then we make it necessary. So we can just accept it. And that's what I'd say right now. Like, I always hear people talk about, like, oh, whatever mental illness is chronic, or, you'll have a relapse or you'll struggle in the future. Okay, like if I don't understand how that would happen, because it's all about what I do. But let's say it does happen. That's fine. I have the tools to handle it and get out of it. So yeah, you really trust yourself here, right? You know how to handle thoughts and feelings, right? So you don't have to see yourself in this battle anymore. You can just go and live your life. Somebody actually mentioned the person who was talking about the guy who originally struggled with scrupulosity. He was Henry VIII's bishop and or priest. Whoa, thank you for tracking that down. Isn't the internet amazing? Let's see here. Is it normal to always have a feeling? Oh, actually, we already tackled that one. Okay, thank you. My hand washing compulsion has become so bad. My hands are bleeding all the time, and it's extremely painful. I'm afraid of getting a blood poisoning from the bacteria, but I just can't stop. What do I do? So this is really common. So it's possible to cut out the compulsions. If you can access a therapist who can help you with this, that can be a great way to get started. I would look at other compulsions as well. It's highly unlikely this is the only compulsion you have. And so you might find it easier to cut out some other compulsions first, to learn how to do it and then cut out these compulsions. But yeah, you can see what's happening here and know that you can stop it. Okay? You can have that difficult feeling, that anxiety, that excruciating pressure and stress, and you can choose not to wash your hands or to wash your hands differently. Hand washing, of course, really interesting compulsion to look at because I had hand washing compulsions where I would have to like go back multiple times and wash my hands under really, really hot water until they felt like they were clean. Cutting that out doesn't mean that I stopped washing my hands. I do wash my hands sometimes still. So working with a therapist can be a great way to learn about that. How do we make that change? And that I'd say for a lot of different compulsions, you may keep the action in your life. It's all about understanding how to change why you do it and how you do it. Let's see another on here. If I continuously think that I might do something bad, in that case, is there a chance that due to the obsession, I might actually ending up doing that thing that I fear I might do? So this is a great question. I was giving a talk in Ottawa at a conference about 2 weeks ago. And so I challenged the audience to think about becoming an alpaca. And now I don't know how many actually became an alpaca. We could check. Like I would imagine there were a lot of people there. Like maybe there was something like 150 people there. So I don't know, like what maybe one or two people turned into an alpaca by thinking about becoming an alpaca. But I mean, in the big scheme of things, that's not like a huge number of people, right? So I mean, odds are most people don't turn into an alpaca if they think about becoming an alpaca. Yeah. I see, Alma, you said you're too late to the conversation. No, you are not. How are you doing today? Let's hop back over to Instagram. Let's see here. So there are a lot of great questions. And I apologize. I can see right now I'm not going to get to all these questions, so I'll be answering questions on Instagram later too. But here's a question. And so this comes up a lot, and I always like this one. How can one deal with nihilism? And I think I saw there was another one in here, very similar. Like, how do you deal with the fact that you know there's just this big universe, and we're on this tiny rock, and we're all gonna die, and life is meaningless, and we'll all become dust. And the universe is just like a fart in a space monster's colon waiting to get squeezed out or something like that. Something like that. The thing that I would look at that this doesn't. So okay, there's actually two things that I would look at. So one, again, your brain is going to come up with whatever is going to get you to react with compulsions, right? So if the uncertainty that gets you to react is, oh no, like what's the meaning of life, like what does it all mean, like what if it's meaningless, etc., and that's going to get you to start ruminating, and it's going to get you to start trying to control things. You're going to start checking for feelings like, oh, does this matter to me, does this feel real? That's all your brain wanted to do, right? Your brain won, right? It found the feeling that gets you to feed it compulsions. And so shift the focus to compulsions, right? Yeah, you may feel, and I think this is often the challenge we run into, we feel like we should know about the meaning of existence. We should know, like, what matters and who am I really, and all of that kind of stuff. And so those are some beliefs that may cause you some challenges. But shift that focus to the compulsions, right? When you see that popping up, you can have that uncertainty. You don't have to engage in compulsions. Okay. Okay. Now, the other thing you can do here is, and this is one of the tricks I always love with any fear that comes up, is to agree with it. And so, like, if I was afraid I was going to kill somebody, or that I would tell myself that I had killed somebody. And so I did kill somebody. And I might say, oh, well, I killed somebody, and yeah, I'm, going to go to prison later today. And so this is, these are my last moments of freedom. How do I want to spend my last moments of freedom in a way that aligns with my values? Okay, so bringing myself again back to that present moment and making a choice. And you can do the exact same with anxieties about nihilism and the meaning of existence. If your brain wants to get into a debate, you don't have to get into a debate with it. You can tell your brain, yeah, the universe is completely meaningless, totally and utterly meaningless. Yep. And tomorrow we're all gonna like poof, disappear in a cloud of atoms, no free will, no consciousness, whatever. But right now, I can make a choice. Like, how do I want to spend my time and energy in a way that's useful to me and those around me? And I'm going to do that, right? Because I get to choose right here, right now, how I spend that time and energy. And so that's what I would always come back to. Whatever you want to think about existence is fine. And right now, you get to spend your time and energy. So enjoy spending it. See, this is Raju from India. Hey, Raju. The more I meditate, negative thoughts and feelings multiply violently. Is it a good sign? And I can ignore it, or should I go slow on meditation, or should I quit it altogether? So there's a couple of things like when we're cutting out compulsions, our brain panics and tries to throw up lots of things. And so that's one thing to consider that could be happening here. And you'll often see people running into this with many different things. Like if they start to cut out compulsions in one area, they may notice compulsions around substance use or sex or something like that just goes through the roof, right? Because the brain is like, I have to get them to do compulsions somehow. But the other thing I would look at there too is how you're meditating. And so I would talk to your meditation teacher. because you might find it really useful to learn some techniques to kind of quiet down the mind, so it's not doing this thing with all of these negative thoughts constantly. So I would look at both of those things. The question up next: how to decrease the frequency of intrusive thoughts. For over a year now, I've had one specific intrusive phase popping up several times daily, even though I have not engaged in compulsions around it. What I would say there is you might want to, again, think about the clothes. Remember the clothes analogy from before? So somebody's throwing all of these clothes at you. You could look at like why do you still see the thoughts as bad if you're not engaging in compulsions around them? Like it might really help to start to see like the compulsions are the stuff we do to the thoughts, the judgments, the unwanting of it. Like why do you, if you're not doing compulsions, why do you still see this as a problem? It's the question that I would explore. Yeah. How can somebody with OCD listen to their gut feeling? I love gut feeling questions. I have a gut feeling right now to go and eat pizza. Our gut feelings are wrong all the time. How can we know when something really is wrong and the gut feeling are telling us, thank you for everything. Thank you for the question. Yeah, I found it really important, especially when getting started on taking care of my mental health, to not listen to anything coming out of the body. And it was just recognizing, you know what, listening to things happening in my body, because I also always had all sorts of like health anxiety things where I'd be like, oh, like this pain means I must be about to die, or I've been poisoned, or I have cancer, or whatever. Whether it was coming out of my brain, my thought organ, my squishy like urge organ up here, or was coming out of my body, I just had to recognize that reacting to all of that stuff had gotten me to where I was. So I had to have at first a blanket, I don't listen to anything. And then gradually, you may possibly sometime in the future find moments when you might listen to something you think. But I wouldn't value that a whole lot. Yeah. Off topic, but do you still train in karate? Whoa. How did you know I used to do karate? I do not currently do any karate, except up here. Let's pop over to Instagram. Okay. If doing compulsions, let's see this here. If doing compulsions is the pattern you've lived your life by ever since you can think, is it yet possible to recover? Oh, absolutely. I think there's no reason to get stuck on this idea like, oh, I've always been this way, so I can't change. But I think it's one of these things, and you see the brain, again, there's anxieties about recovering, and it's, judging and thinking, oh no, you won't be able to do it because of this or because of that. So when questions like this pop up, again, we don't have to see ourselves as broken. We don't have to see ourselves as having something wrong with us. Really, really important to keep in mind. I like some of my earliest memories are of obsessing. Like I can remember like spending weeks as a little kid convinced that I had damaged somebody's furniture, and that like horrible things were going to happen to me. Like it consumed me, and I don't know how old I was, but I was very young. Like this was, I had struggled with this for my whole life. Like the first time I cut out a compulsion with ERP, it was to not check the door lock. I had never not checked the door lock for my entire life. Like that, multiple compulsions I had to cut out had always been in my life. Like the first time I cut them out was the first time I had ever not done them. And so yeah, I think just what I would say is always, because if it's not that barrier your brain's thinking up, it's going to be something else. So whatever barrier your brain comes up with, whether it's like you've always done this so you can't change, and it'll try to come up with some kind of neuroscience-y sounding reason, like like because you practiced this your whole life, the networks in your brain must be so, I don't know, ingrained in concrete now. Or it'll do you've got some genetic thing, so you'll always have this problem, or you're missing some kind of chemical, and so unless you have that, you'll always have this problem. Or you had some traumatic experience in the past, so you can never fix that. Therefore, you can never get over this, and so on. It's gonna be one of these things or something else. It's always gonna come up with it, to just recognize that's actually part of it. The brain's gonna try to come up with more problems for you to solve, just to keep you digging the hole. Okay. What are your thoughts on Dr. Jeffrey Schwartz's 4 steps: relabel, reattribute, refocus, revalue, as described in the book Brain Lock? The only thing I'd watch out for, is that, again, what I was talking about, like there aren't OCD thoughts. And so people often engage in compulsions that they see as totally rational. And if you really want to get over it for good, you're probably going to make changes around things you don't label as OCD. And so that's the one catch that I would see there. It's kind of like having, like, think about physical fitness. Like, you don't just want to exercise so you're not out of shape, right? Like, if you only wait until you can label something as being out of shape and then you try to exercise, you're just always going to be kind of like doing this yo-yo thing. Where like, oh, I have to get out of shape, and then I'm going to label it as being out of shape, and I'm going to exercise. And I would argue it's much more useful to just shift the focus to, here are the healthy things I want to do proactively always, and I'm going to go and do them and be myself. So here we go. And this kind of what we were just talking about there, how to differentiate between real and intrusive thoughts. I would not. I really, really extremely strongly recommend against it. All thoughts are thoughts. The stuff in your head is stuff in your head. The problem comes not from the stuff in your head, but how we react to it. Right. And so if you get stuck on this idea that, like, oh, it feels real and I don't want it to feel real, and I'm going to do compulsions to check if it's real, what are you going to get all the time? You're going to get a feeling that it's real. Right? Be very aware of the feelings that you're chasing and judging. Again, it's just like if you check the door lock so you feel safe, you are not going to feel safe. If you check thoughts so that you feel they're not real, you're going to keep feeling that they're real. Let's do some more Instagram. And I know we got just about 8 minutes left. Was there one specific type of therapy that helped you recover from mental illness? No, like, and we get like, we want to find like the perfect solution. We kind of get into this magical thinking stuff, like, oh, like, teach me the magical formula, and then boom, I'll make the thoughts go away, and everything will be better. But it really is like physical fitness. There are some consistent principles, right? You're going to consistently be pushing into challenging emotions. As you do that, you're going to be changing how you react to them. There are many different types of therapy that, embody that approach. And you'll probably, as you work on things, mix and match different exercises and techniques, just like you would in physical fitness, as you move towards your goals. And I think it's really important to think about what your goals are and where you want to go. And because, like, if you really, say in fitness, if you wanted to become a power lifter, but you're going to like Zumba class where you're just dancing, then yeah, of course you're going to be really disappointed about, how much your deadlift is, because you're not practicing that skill. And so really look at, like, don't see mental illness as this like amorphous blob. Like, oh, I just want to get over mental illness. Right? Think about the skills that you want to learn. Like, what do you want to do? What are the things in your life that you're trying to do right now that you're struggling to do? And then get skills to do those things. And if it's around thoughts, like, you want to stop getting troubled by thoughts, you might look at techniques that are going to help you relate differently to thoughts, and accept them and let them be there. If you find you're avoiding a lot of things in life, you're going to bring in a lot of behavioral exercises, so that you're actually going and doing those things and feeling anxious while you do them. Okay. We got a question here. How does your group coaching work? And so over on Patreon, so there is an Everybody Has a Brain Patreon, and we do weekly check-ins a couple times a week. And then there's also a monthly workshop. And so, yeah, if you can check that out if you just go to patreon.com/everybodyhasabrain. Let's see here. Instead of just getting No. So usually imagine. Oh, it looks like there's some. Okay, it's great. There's conversations happening over there in the chat sidebar. And I often feel sad, though I know the roots of my intrusive thoughts. The thoughts still occur, so I think that must be the root. And if it really was, the thoughts won't happen. Yeah, maybe. There's your water bottle story in your book hurt my brain. If you're not familiar with the water bottle story, and I guess there's kind of a couple, but it was about I once thought I might have forgotten my water bottle back at the gym, and this was a story where I was talking about, what it's like taking care of my mental health now. And so it was a couple of years ago. I was living where I'm living now. I was going to a different gym, and I left the gym. And then as I was walking out, I noticed I didn't remember putting my water bottle in my bag. And so you might think like, well, just open your bag and check. But for me, like I just see that uncertainty, and immediately I know, oh, I'm worried, like I've lost my bottle, and like, I have to go buy a new one, and just all these like, oh, like you're wasting money, and all like it just, there's this immediate like kind of like disappointment, uh, you know, unhappy feeling, and you know, but it was an uncertainty, and so I knew not to check it. Right, it's an uncertainty, and so it's there. So I don't know if my water bottle's in my bag or not. Yeah, maybe I did forget it, but I'm not gonna go and react to it and try to control it. And yeah, it's really useful, right, to notice those kind of simple everyday uncertainties that pop up throughout our lives, and that's your opportunity to really work on your emotional fitness. Be able to say, okay, like that's where we're doing the exercise. Oh, here's this challenge right now, and I'm not going to react to it. I'm going to show my brain it doesn't have to worry about these things. And yeah, like it may not seem like a big deal. It's not something you'd label as an OCD or an anxiety disorder or a disordered obsession or thought of any kind. But I know that it's not about these labels. It's just about, am I teaching my brain to try to cope with and control uncertainty? And if I do, then my brain will just come up with more uncertainties, and I won't like that, and it'll just naturally progress further, right? Well, thank you to everybody that's reading the book out there. I see a bunch of you mentioned it in the sidebar there. Somebody asks here, my intrusive thoughts are happening when I speak. Have you ever heard about that? Oh yeah, it's very common. Yeah, your brain is going to throw up intrusive thoughts in whatever way is going to make you react. And so if you have a desire to, be present and, speak in such a way that people aren't judging you while you're speaking or something like that, it's very natural that then your brain is throwing up intrusive thoughts to try to get you to try to control how you're speaking and to worry that you might be distracted about the intrusive thoughts. And let's do one last question from over here on Instagram. Actually, maybe this is relevant to what we were just talking about there. Did you deal with social anxiety and depression? What do you think about it? Absolutely. And these are things to always look at. Like, this is something I'll often talk about so particularly around social anxiety. We often accept social anxiety and particularly compulsions around social anxiety as just normal, not recognizing that they are just the normal ways that we practice so many unhealthy compulsions that can lead us into things we might see as other more disordered issues. And then, of course, depression, of course, if we're not being ourselves, right, particularly around other people, we're not engaging in building relationships, we know that can very naturally lead to depression. So, I first went to get help for depression, but I would see depression as the natural result of all of the other really unhealthy stuff I was doing. And that in general, like if you're not being yourself, you're going to be depressed. But I would look at, how are you not being yourself? And so one of those ways is social anxiety. We often experience uncertainty and anxiety about other people. We react to it. We try to control it. And we see that as normal. But we don't recognize that what we're doing there is really training our brains to come up with more uncertainties to react to. So that's something I would say to you out there is, one, not seeing social anxiety as separate from other issues you're running into. Right? For one that I always bring up is contamination. So we're talking about contamination earlier. And so this to the person that was asking about hand washing. What are we often really worried about with contamination? We're actually worried about other people judging us because we spread germs to somebody and hurt them. And the contamination is just our brain's way of trying to control that thing that we're afraid of, that we might cause harm to somebody else. And then other people will judge us for it. Contamination is quite often about social anxiety. It's about being judged by others. And if we don't look at the broader issues around social anxiety and address those, right? Learning, hey, it's okay. We don't have to, struggle with all of these fears around being judged by others. We can accept them. We can trust ourselves to handle these challenges. If we're constantly engaging in compulsions around social anxieties throughout our lives, it's very difficult to cut out those compulsions around contamination, right? Because the brain is very logical. If you don't go to a party, let's say, because, I'm kind of tired, I don't really feel like myself, and then, I won't talk like myself and people will judge me. They'll think I'm boring or something like that. So I'm not going to go. What that tells your brain, it says like, look, brain, if I just kind of feel a little like people might judge me, I'm not going to go to something. Like being judged by people for like not being myself, that's bad. So the brain then very logically says, well, if you killed somebody, that would be really bad, right? So and then people are really going to judge you. So I'm going to look for all of the ways that you might, do this thing that you're afraid people are going to judge you for. And so really look at that kind of logical progression. Okay. So because as long as you keep the normal compulsion around, your brain is really going to struggle to cut out the compulsion that it sees and you see as being much more severe. Right? So cut out the lesser compulsion, you make it easier to handle the bigger anxiety. Okay. Everybody, I am so sorry. We have come to the end. I know there are still a ton of questions over on Instagram and even a bunch of questions here on YouTube as well. I am sorry for not getting to everybody this time. I'm going to try to answer as many of the questions I can. So particularly on Instagram, I'll post answers over there and I'll see what I can do about YouTube. But after this video goes up, if you still have a question, just throw it down in the comments below. Thank you so much to everybody that came out today, that is listening to this afterwards. Yeah, I really love that we can come together, we can share about these skills and build community around proactively taking care of our mental health. So thank you. Whatever you're doing this week, enjoy doing it and keeping your brain with you to do it. All right. Thank you. Bye.